I was on minute 43 of the most important conference call of the quarter when my screen went black. Not a technical glitch. Someone had forcibly removed me from the virtual room. My phone buzzed immediately. Conference room. Now. It was Director Paul Hendricks. I walked down the hallway with my coffee still warm in my hand, wondering what justified pulling me from a call with our biggest client during an active system failure. The conference room door was already open. Paul stood with his arms crossed, his face red. "You're a liability, not an asset," he snapped before I could even sit down. I nodded calmly, setting my coffee on the table. That moment, that single sentence, would cost him everything. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Dila Roth, and I'd been with Spirit Technologies for 6 years. I started as a junior analyst and worked my way up to senior crisis management specialist. My job was simple: when things broke, I fixed them. When clients panicked, I calmed them. When systems failed at 3 a.m, I was the one on the call walking engineers through solutions while half the leadership team slept. I was good at it. Really good. My performance reviews were spotless. I'd saved 3 major accounts in the past year alone. The division had grown by 40%, and I'd personally managed the technical relationships that made that growth possible. I lived alone in a modest apartment 20 minutes from the office. No pets, no plants that required much attention. My life was my work, and I'd convinced myself that was enough. I had savings, more than most people realized. I'd been investing carefully since my first promotion, and I lived well below my means. Financial security mattered to me. My mother had raised me alone after my father left, and I'd watched her struggle. I promised myself I'd never be in that position. Spirit Technologies was a mid-sized software company specializing in enterprise solutions. We weren't flashy, but we were reliable. Our clients depended on us for systems that couldn't afford to fail. Hospitals. Banks. Supply chain logistics. When something went wrong, people noticed immediately. Paul Hendricks had been brought in as Director of Client Services 8 months earlier. He came from a larger firm, talked constantly about his connections, and made it clear he thought Spirit was beneath him. He was 46, dressed like he shopped exclusively at stores I couldn't afford, and had a habit of interrupting people mid-sentence. From day one, he'd been hostile toward me. I couldn't figure out why. I'd never worked with him before. I was polite in meetings. I delivered results. But he treated every interaction like I'd personally offended him. "Your reports are too technical," he said once. I simplified them. "You're not collaborative enough," he said another time. I started copying more people on emails. "You make decisions without consulting leadership," he claimed. I began documenting every approval I received. Nothing satisfied him. And slowly, I realized nothing would. This wasn't about performance. This was personal. The crisis call I'd been pulled from involved Calderon Industries, one of our top 5 accounts. Their inventory system had crashed during a product launch. Thousands of orders were stuck in limbo. Their CEO was furious. I'd been on the phone with their technical team, coordinating with our engineers, building a recovery plan. I was doing my job. The job I was hired to do. The job I'd done successfully dozens of times before. But Paul had pulled me out. In the conference room, he paced back and forth. "Do you have any idea how embarrassing it is when my staff makes decisions without clearance?" "I was managing an active crisis," I said evenly. "Standard protocol. Standard protocol is checking with me first." The client needed immediate response. "I've handled situations like this." "I don't care what you've handled before." He leaned forward, palms flat on the table. "You're not some hero. You're a liability. Every time you open your mouth on these calls, you make promises we can't keep." That wasn't true. I kept meticulous records. Every commitment I made, I delivered on. "I have the resolution timeline documented," I said. "I can show you." "I don't need to see your documentation." He waved his hand dismissively. "I need you to understand your place. Your support staff. You don't lead client conversations. You don't make judgment calls. You execute what you're told." I felt my jaw tighten. Support staff. I'd been leading crisis management for 3 years. I had certifications he'd never bothered to earn. I'd trained half the people on his team. Understood, I said. He seemed surprised I didn't argue. He'd probably expected me to push back, to give him an excuse to escalate. Instead, I stood up, grabbed my coffee, and left. I returned to my desk. Someone else had taken over the Calderon call. I watched the chat logs. They were floundering. The client was getting angrier. Our engineers were contradicting each other. It was a mess. I didn't intervene. I'd been told to stay out of it. 2 hours later, Calderon's CEO sent an email threatening to terminate the contract. Paul forwarded it to the entire leadership team with a note, "This is what happens when we don't follow proper channels." He was blaming me for a disaster he'd created by removing me from the call. I said nothing. That night, I sat in my apartment and did something I hadn't done in years. I opened a bottle of wine, poured a glass, and let myself think about leaving. Not in a vague someday sense. Actually leaving. I pulled up my financial spreadsheets. My savings were substantial. I had no debt. I'd been maxing out my retirement contributions. I owned my car outright. If I left Spirit Technologies tomorrow, I could survive for 2 years without working. Longer if I was careful. But leaving felt like defeat. I'd built something here. I had relationships with clients who trusted me. I had a reputation. And yet, sitting there with my wine, I realized something uncomfortable. The reputation didn't matter if the person in charge refused to acknowledge it. The relationships didn't matter if I wasn't allowed to maintain them. I was building something for a company that didn't value me. I didn't make a decision that night. But I started planning. The next week, Paul called an all-hands meeting for client services. He stood at the front of the room with a presentation titled Operational Excellence. "We've had too many near misses lately," he began. "Too many situations where individual contributors are making decisions that should go through proper approval chains." Everyone knew he was talking about me. Several people glanced in my direction. Moving forward, all client communication during crisis events must be pre-approved by management. No exceptions. One of my colleagues, an analyst named Fiona, raised her hand. "What if the situation is urgent? If we have to wait for approval, response times could." "Then you wait," Paul interrupted. "I'd rather have a delayed response than an unauthorized one." I watched Fiona's face fall. She was smart, capable, and she cared about doing good work. And she was learning, in real time, that none of that mattered. After the meeting, she caught up with me in the hallway. "That's insane," she whispered. "Half of what we do is time-sensitive." "I know. Are you going to say something?" I shook my head. "It won't change anything." She looked confused. "But you're the best at this. If anyone can push back." "He doesn't want to hear it, Fiona. Trust me." She walked away looking frustrated. I understood the feeling. Paul's new policy went into effect immediately. Within days, response times tripled. Clients who were used to getting immediate attention during outages now sat on hold while we drafted emails to management asking permission to help them. I watched it happen with a strange detachment. I followed the new rules exactly. Every client call, I'd say, "Let me check with my director and get back to you." Every technical question, I'd forward to Paul and wait for approval. He loved it at first. He thought I was finally falling in line. But the clients hated it. They didn't care about our internal bureaucracy. They cared about their systems working. One afternoon, I was on a call with a client named Whitman and Associates. Their CFO was furious about a billing error that had duplicated charges. "This is the 3rd time I've called about this," he said. "Can you fix it or not?" "I need to verify the correction with my director," I said. "I'll have an answer within 24 hours. 24 hours? Your team created this error. Fix it now. I understand your frustration, but I need approval to process refunds." He hung up. 10 minutes later, Paul stormed to my desk. "What did you say to Whitman?" "I followed protocol. I told him I needed your approval." "You made us look incompetent." I stared at him. "You created the protocol." His face went red. For a moment, I thought he might actually lose control completely. Instead, he turned and walked away. I returned to my work. It went on like this for weeks. Paul's policies created chaos, but he blamed the team every time something went wrong. He'd instituted daily status meetings that lasted an hour and accomplished nothing. He'd started requiring written justifications for every client interaction. He'd begun CCing himself on every email, then criticizing people for overcommunicating. The department was falling apart. 3 people quit in 1 month. Fiona was actively interviewing elsewhere. The rest of us were just surviving day to day. I kept my head down and did exactly what I was told. No more, no less. If Paul wanted to micromanage, I'd let him. If he wanted to approve every decision, I'd wait for his approval. If his system was inefficient and damaging, that was his responsibility to fix. I stopped caring about the outcomes. I know how that sounds. I'd spent years taking pride in my work, in solving problems, in being the person who made things better. But caring had become a liability. Every time I tried to help, Paul found fault. Every time I took initiative, he called it insubordination. So I stopped trying. And quietly, I started looking at job listings. The opportunity appeared on a Tuesday morning. I was scrolling through my email when I saw a message from a recruiter. The subject line read, "Leadership role, crisis management, fully remote." The company was called Vertex Solutions. They were larger than Spirit Technologies, well-funded, and rapidly expanding. They needed someone to build their crisis response program from scratch. The salary was 40% higher than what I currently made. Full remote work. Equity options. Unlimited PTO. I read the job description 3 times. It was describing my exact skill set. Everything I'd been doing at Spirit, but with actual authority and resources. I replied to the recruiter that afternoon. We scheduled a call for the end of the week. I didn't tell anyone at Spirit. Not Fiona, not any of my colleagues. Definitely not Paul. The same week, Paul scheduled a performance review. It wasn't time for my annual review, that wasn't until August. This was something else. I sat across from him in his office. He had a folder open in front of him. Inside, I could see printed emails. "I've been documenting concerns about your performance," he said. "Concerns? Your attitude has been problematic. You've been resistant to feedback. You've shown a lack of enthusiasm for your work." I kept my expression neutral. "Can you give me specific examples? Your response times have slowed. You're no longer proactive. You seem disengaged. I've been following the protocols you implemented. Every client interaction requires your approval. I've been waiting for those approvals before proceeding. That's not an excuse for poor performance." I wanted to laugh. It was absurd. He'd created a system designed to slow everything down, and now he was criticizing me for being slow. "What would you like me to do differently?" I asked. "I'd like you to show some initiative. Stop hiding behind process and start solving problems. You told me I couldn't make decisions without approval. I told you to use better judgment about when approval is necessary. Can you clarify what situations require approval and which don't?" He closed the folder. "If you can't figure that out, maybe you're not suited for this role." I left his office knowing exactly what was happening. He was building a case to fire me. The documented concerns, the vague criticisms, the impossible standards, it was all a paper trail. I could fight it. I could go to HR. I could document his harassment, his contradictory instructions, his obvious bias. Or I could let him think he was winning while I planned my exit. I chose the latter. My first interview with Vertex was on Friday. It was a video call with their VP of Operations, a woman named Colette Harper. She was direct, knowledgeable, and asked detailed questions about my crisis management experience. I told her about the Calderon situation, how I'd been managing the crisis when I was removed from the call, how the situation deteriorated without proper oversight, how I'd documented the entire incident. "So you were pulled from a call mid-crisis?" she asked. "Yes. And your director didn't have the technical background to manage it himself?" "Correct." She made a note. "How did you handle that?" I followed his instructions and stepped back. I documented my recommendations in case they were needed later. Were they? The client threatened to terminate. I was eventually allowed to fix the relationship, but it took significant effort to rebuild trust. She nodded slowly. You're describing a situation where leadership created a problem and then blamed you for it. I'm describing a situation where communication broke down, I said carefully. She smiled. You're diplomatic. I appreciate that. But let me be direct. We're looking for someone who can handle high-pressure situations with autonomy. Someone who doesn't need permission to do the right thing. Does that describe you? Yes, I said. That describes me exactly. We talked for another 30 minutes. She introduced me to 2 other team members via video. They asked technical questions. I answered them easily. This was the work I'd been doing for years, the work I was good at, the work I enjoyed. At the end of the call, Colette said, "We'd like to move forward. Are you interested in a second interview?" Absolutely. Great. I'll have my assistant send you some times next week. I ended the call feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Hope. That same Friday afternoon, Paul called me into his office again. We're restructuring the department, he said. Your role is being eliminated. I'd expected this. I'd prepared for it. But hearing it still felt like a punch to the chest. When? I asked. End of the month. We'll provide 2 weeks severance. 2 weeks. After 6 years. After saving multiple accounts. After working weekends and holidays and middle-of-the-night emergencies. Understood, I said. He looked disappointed. I think he'd expected me to beg, or cry, or get angry. Instead, I stood up and walked out. I returned to my desk and opened my personal email. The message from Vertex's assistant was already there. Second interview scheduled for Tuesday. I smiled. The second interview went even better than the first. I met with the CEO, the entire operations team, and 2 engineers. We talked about building processes, about crisis communication strategies, about how to scale support systems. At the end, the CEO said, "We'd like to make you an offer." They did. It arrived in my email that evening. The salary was even higher than the job posting had indicated. The benefits were incredible. Start date was flexible. I accepted immediately. Then I drafted my resignation letter to Spirit Technologies. I didn't mention Paul. I didn't mention the hostile work environment or the impossible standards or the constant undermining. I simply stated that I'd accepted another position and my last day would be in 2 weeks. I submitted it Monday morning. HR processed it quietly. Paul didn't say a word to me. He probably thought he'd won, that he'd pushed me out before I could cause more problems. I spent my final 2 weeks documenting everything. Every client relationship, every crisis protocol, every technical system I'd built or maintained. I organized it all into clear folders with instructions. I wanted whoever came after me to have a chance at success. Fiona asked me where I was going. I told her about Vertex. Her eyes widened. That's huge, she said. Congratulations. Thank you. Are you nervous? No, I said honestly. I'm relieved. My last day at Spirit Technologies was a Friday. No one threw me a party. No one made a speech. Paul didn't even acknowledge my departure. I packed my desk, returned my badge, and walked out. I felt lighter than I had in months. I started at Vertex the following Monday. The difference was immediate. People listened when I spoke. My ideas were valued. When I identified problems, I was empowered to solve them. The CEO checked in regularly, not to micromanage, but to make sure I had what I needed. I built the crisis response program from the ground up. I hired a team. I trained them. I created protocols that actually worked. Within 3 months, we'd handled 6 major incidents with 0 client losses. The CEO sent me a personal thank you email after each one. I moved into a better apartment. I adopted a cat. I started running in the mornings. I remembered what it felt like to enjoy my work again. 3 months into my new job, I got a message on LinkedIn. It was from Fiona. You need to see this, she wrote. She'd attached a link to a news article. The headline read, Spirit Technologies faces major client exodus amid service failures. I read the article. It detailed how Spirit had lost 4 major accounts in 6 weeks. Clients cited poor response times, lack of technical expertise, and deteriorating service quality. The company's stock had dropped 18%. At the bottom of the article, there was a quote from Paul Hendricks: "We're committed to rebuilding trust with our clients and improving our operational processes." I closed the article. I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no vindication, no anger. Just nothing. That should have been the end of the story. But it wasn't. 3 days later, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Is this Dila Roth?" "Yes. This is Gregory Stanton. I'm the CEO of Spirit Technologies. Do you have a few minutes?" I sat down. "I suppose so. I'll get right to the point. We're in trouble. We've lost several major accounts, and our crisis management capability has completely collapsed. I've been reviewing what happened, and I keep seeing your name in the documentation. You handled most of our major incidents over the past 3 years." "I did. I'm calling to ask if you'd consider coming back. We'd match any salary you're currently making, plus 20%. We'd give you a director title. Full authority over crisis operations." I let the silence stretch out for a moment. "Where's Paul Hendricks?" "He's no longer with the company." "When did he leave?" 2 weeks ago. "Did he resign or was he terminated?" Gregory hesitated. "He was asked to resign." "Because of the client losses?" "Among other things." "Look, I know you had difficulties with him. I've been reviewing the situation, and I can see that his management style was problematic." Problematic. That was one word for it. "I appreciate the offer," I said. "But I'm not interested." "Can I ask why?" "I'm happy where I am. I have autonomy, respect, and a team I'm building exactly the way I want to build it. Spirit Technologies had 6 years to recognize my value. You didn't. One bad quarter doesn't change that. I understand you're upset." "I'm not upset," I interrupted. "I'm just not interested. But I wish you luck." I ended the call. For a moment, I sat there staring at my phone. Then I laughed. Actually laughed. The CEO of Spirit Technologies had called me personally, offering me more money and a bigger title, and I'd turned him down without a second thought. It felt incredible. Gregory called back 2 days later. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail. "Dila, I'd really like to discuss this further. We're prepared to be very flexible on terms." He called again the following week. And the week after that. I never answered. I never called back. The emails started after the call stopped working. First from Gregory, then from HR, then from an executive I'd never even heard of. They offered larger salaries, signing bonuses, equity, flexible schedules. They promised cultural changes, new leadership, complete operational freedom. I deleted every message. Fiona messaged me, "Did Spirit contact you?" "Yes." "Are you going back?" "Absolutely not." "Good. This place is a disaster. I'm leaving next month." "Where are you going?" "Vertex is hiring, right?" I smiled. "Send me your resume." 4 months after I left Spirit Technologies, I was having coffee before work when I saw another news article. Spirit had been acquired by a larger company. The acquisition was being described as a rescue deal after Spirit's market value had dropped 40%. Gregory Stanton was stepping down as CEO. Most of the executive team was being replaced. I thought about Paul. I wondered where he'd ended up. I could have looked him up, but I didn't. He wasn't worth my time. I finished my coffee and opened my laptop. My team had a meeting in 15 minutes to discuss our quarterly goals. We'd exceeded every target. The CEO was talking about promoting me to VP. At Vertex, I wasn't a liability. I was exactly what I'd always been, an asset. 6 months in, I was at a conference in Chicago. It was an industry event for crisis management professionals. I was on a panel about building resilient support systems. During the networking hour afterward, someone approached me. I didn't recognize him at first. Then I did. Paul Hendricks. He looked terrible. His expensive suit didn't fit quite right anymore. He'd lost weight. His hair was grayer. He had the look of someone who'd been humbled by circumstances. "Dila," he said. "I thought that was you on the panel." "Paul. You were great up there. Really great." "Thank you." An awkward silence. He shifted his weight from foot to foot. "I heard you're doing well at Vertex," he said. "I am." That's good. That's really good." Another silence. I didn't fill it. I wasn't going to make this easier for him. "Look," he said finally, "I wanted to say I'm sorry for how things went at Spirit. I was under a lot of pressure, and I handled the situation poorly." I studied his face. He seemed sincere. He probably was sincere. People often are, once the consequences of their actions catch up with them. "I appreciate you saying that," I said. "I'm actually looking for work right now. I was wondering if Vertex might have any openings. I saw on LinkedIn that you're hiring." There it was. The real reason for the apology. "We are hiring," I said. "But not for roles that would be appropriate for your background." His face fell. "Oh. Well, if anything opens up." "Paul, let me be clear. Even if we had a position that matched your experience, I wouldn't recommend you. You told me I was a liability. You undermined my work. You created systems designed to make me fail, then blamed me when they didn't work. You had me pushed out of the company." "I was wrong," he said quickly. "I see that now. I made mistakes." "You did. And I've moved on. I hope you find something that works for you, but it won't be at my company." I walked away. My hands were shaking slightly, but my voice had been steady. I'd said what I needed to say. Behind me, I heard him call out, "Dila, wait." I kept walking. That night, back in my hotel room, I thought about the past year. About being pulled from that crisis call. About Paul's red face as he called me a liability. About the months of undermining and criticism and impossible standards. I thought about Gregory's phone calls, begging me to come back. About Paul showing up at a conference, looking for a job. About how Spirit Technologies had collapsed without the people who'd actually known how to do the work. I didn't feel victorious exactly. I felt at peace. I'd spent 6 years building something at Spirit Technologies. When they failed to value it, I'd simply taken my skills elsewhere. I hadn't needed revenge. I'd just needed to leave. And in leaving, I'd found something better. The consequences that followed weren't my doing. They were the natural result of poor leadership, bad decisions, and taking talented people for granted. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's just living well. A year after I left Spirit Technologies, Fiona and I were having lunch. She'd joined Vertex 5 months earlier and was thriving. We were talking about the quarterly results, another record-breaking performance. "Do you ever think about Spirit?" she asked. "Sometimes," I said. "Not often. I heard they're struggling to fill roles. Their reputation is so bad that no one wants to work there." "That's unfortunate." "Is it though?" She grinned. "They created their own problems." I smiled. "They did. Do you think Paul ever figured out what he did wrong?" I thought about our encounter at the conference. About his apology that came only when he needed something. About how he'd seemed genuinely confused that I wouldn't help him. "I don't know," I said honestly. "I don't think people like that often do. They see consequences, but they don't connect them to their own actions. They think they were unlucky, or that circumstances were unfair, or that other people were unreasonable." "Yeah," Fiona said. "You're probably right." We finished lunch and walked back to the office together. It was a beautiful day. The sun was shining. I had work I enjoyed waiting for me. A team that respected me. A company that valued me. Paul Hendricks had called me a liability. He'd been absolutely wrong. But in a way, I was grateful to him. He'd forced me to recognize my own worth. He'd pushed me to leave a place that didn't deserve me. He'd inadvertently freed me to find something better. Sometimes the worst thing someone does to you turns out to be the best thing that could have happened. Not because they meant well, but because their cruelty forces you to choose yourself. I chose myself. And everything that came after, the new job, the success, the peace, that was the result of that choice. These days, I run the entire crisis response division at Vertex. We're the industry standard for how to handle high-pressure situations. Other companies study our protocols. I speak at conferences. I mentor young professionals trying to build careers in this field. I make triple what I made at Spirit. I work remotely. I have a team of 15 people who are talented, dedicated, and treated with respect. When they do good work, they're recognized for it. When they make mistakes, they're supported. I'm not bitter about what happened. I'm grateful. Paul Hendricks showed me exactly who he was, and I believed him. I didn't waste years trying to prove myself to someone who was determined not to see my value. Instead, I found people who did see it. And I built something worth building with them. If you take anything from my story, take this: your value doesn't decrease based on someone's inability to see it. When people show you they don't appreciate you, believe them. And then find people who do. Sometimes being called a liability is the push you need to become someone else's most valuable asset. And 3 days after Paul pulled me from that crisis call, when everything at Spirit Technologies imploded, I wasn't there to fix it. I was exactly where I needed to be, somewhere better, building something new. That's not revenge. That's just choosing yourself. And there's nothing more powerful than that.